The gunshot that killed Delilah Turner's youngest brother echoed across the valley like the crack of divine judgment, and in that moment she knew her family's blood would water the Utah soil before the summer grass turned brown. She stood at the window of their ranch house outside Provo, watching the dust rise from the road where riders approached. Her father's voice carried from the barn, sharp and commanding as he rallied her two brothers. The range war had been brewing for months, ever since the cattle baron Marcus Hendricks decided their water rights belonged to him. Delilah pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the heat of the June morning seep through. She was 22 years old, and she had watched her mother die of fever 2 winters past. Now she would watch her menfolk die for pride and property. "Delilah, get away from that window!" Her father's voice made her jump. Samuel Turner stood in the doorway, his rifle across his chest, his weathered face set in grim lines. Behind him, her brothers Thomas and James checked their ammunition with hands that did not shake. Thomas was 25, James barely 19. Both had their father's stubborn jaw and their mother's dark eyes. "Papa, you cannot win this fight," Delilah said, hating how her voice cracked. "Hendricks has 30 men. You have 2 sons and a handful of ranch hands who already rode out. Then we die defending what's ours." Samuel's blue eyes, so like her own, held no fear. "You stay in this house. You bar the door. You hide in the cellar if things go bad." "Papa, that's an order, girl." The 3 men walked out, and Delilah watched them take positions behind the water trough, the fence posts, the corner of the barn. The riders came closer, a dark mass of horses and hatred. She recognized Hendricks at their head, his white hat gleaming in the sunlight. What happened next would burn itself into her memory forever. The negotiation lasted less than 5 minutes. She could not hear the words, but she saw her father shake his head, saw him raise his rifle. Then the valley exploded with gunfire. Thomas went down first, clutching his chest. James screamed his brother's name and stood up from cover, firing wildly. He took 3 bullets before he hit the ground. Samuel Turner fought like a man possessed, dropping 2 of Hendricks's men before a shot caught him in the shoulder, then another in the stomach. Delilah was already running, her skirts bunched in her fists, the bar on the door forgotten. She burst from the house screaming, and perhaps that saved her father's life for a few more minutes. Hendricks raised his hand, and the shooting stopped. "Well now," he called out, his voice carrying easily. "Didn't know Samuel had such a pretty daughter." She fell to her knees beside her father, her hands already red with his blood. Thomas and James lay still, their eyes open to the cloudless sky. Dead. Both dead. "Papa, hold on! Please hold on!" "Delilah," his voice was thick with blood, "you run. You hear me? You run and don't look back. I am not leaving you. You got no choice, girl." His hand gripped hers with surprising strength. "Hendricks won't let you stay. You witnessed this. You run." Marcus Hendricks dismounted, his boots hitting the dirt with heavy thuds. "Your pa's right, Miss Turner. This is unfortunate business. Your father and brothers were warned. They chose to fight." He looked down at Samuel without expression. "I will give you 1 hour to pack what you can carry. Then you leave this valley and you never come back. If you stay, if you talk to any law in Provo, your death will not be quick. Do you understand me?" She understood that she was looking at the man who murdered her family. She understood that she was alone, that justice was a lie men told themselves, that the strong took what they wanted from the weak. "I understand," she whispered. Her father died while she held his hand. She watched the light leave his eyes, watched him go to join her mother and brothers in whatever lay beyond. Then she walked back to the house on legs that did not feel like her own and began to pack. She took clothing, her mother's jewelry, the family Bible, and the money her father kept hidden in the floorboards. $300, a fortune and a pittance. She harnessed their gentlest horse to the small wagon, loaded her possessions, and drove away from the only home she had ever known without looking back. If she looked back, she would turn to salt like Lot's wife, or she would crumble to dust, and she could not afford either. Provo was impossible. Hendricks owned the sheriff. Salt Lake City was too close. She drove north and east into the wilderness, her vision blurred with tears, her body moving automatically. The summer sun beat down mercilessly. The wagon wheels creaked. The horse plodded forward. She did not know where she was going, She only knew she had to get far away, as far as the money and horse would take her. The foothills rose around her, covered in scrub oak and sagebrush. She followed old trails, avoided the main roads, and tried not to think about the 3 bodies lying in the dust behind her. Night fell, and she made a cold camp in a hollow between hills. She did not dare light a fire. She sat in the wagon bed, wrapped in a blanket, and finally let herself weep. Great tearing sobs that shook her whole body. She cried until she had no tears left, until she was empty and hollow as a dried gourd. The next day she drove on, and the next. Her supplies dwindled. The horse grew tired. On the 4th day, in the high country where pine trees replaced scrub oak, she realized she was lost, completely and utterly lost. The trails had petered out. The wagon could go no farther through the thick forest. That was when she saw the smoke, a thin column of gray rising above the trees, perhaps a mile distant. It could be trappers, it could be outlaws, it could be anyone. But she had run out of options. She unhitched the horse, took what she could carry in a pack, and walked toward the smoke. The cabin sat in a clearing beside a creek, built from hand-hewn logs with a stone chimney. A lean-to stable held 2 horses and a mule. Pelts hung stretched on frames beside the cabin. A man knelt by the creek, washing something in the cold water. Delilah stopped at the edge of the clearing. The man stood up, and she realized with a start how big he was. Well over 6 feet, with shoulders like an ox and arms thick with muscle. His hair was dark brown and hung past his collar, and a full beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a rough homespun shirt, and a knife hung at his belt. He stared at her, and she stared back. "Help you?" His voice was deep, rough from disuse. "I need help," she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Please. I have nowhere else to go." He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in her torn dress, her tangled hair, the desperation that must have shown on her face. "You running from the law?" "No, I'm running from a man who murdered my family." Something shifted in his expression. "You hurt?" "No." "Hungry?" "Yes." He jerked his head toward the cabin. "Come on then, got stew." She followed him, her legs trembling with relief and exhaustion. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies and books. The smell of meat and herbs filled the air from the pot hanging over the fire. He ladled stew into a wooden bowl and set it before her with a spoon. She ate like a starving animal, barely tasting it, just needing the warmth and sustenance. He sat across from her, watching. "Got a name?" he asked. "Delilah Turner." "Donovan Thatcher." He paused. "What happened, Miss Turner?" And so she told him. All of it. The range war, the shooting, her father and brothers dying in the dirt, Hendrix's threat, her flight into the wilderness. He listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Hendrix, Marcus Hendrix out of Provo? You know him?" "Know of him. He has a bad reputation among the trappers and mountain folk. Pushed a lot of small ranchers off their land." Donovan's jaw tightened. "Killed a trapper friend of mine 3 years back. Made it look like an accident." "I cannot go back," Delilah said. "I have nowhere to go." "You can stay here," Donovan said simply. "Long as you need." She looked up sharply. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "I know enough." He stood and walked to the window, his broad back to her. "I have been alone on this mountain for 5 years. Another mouth to feed is not a burden. And if Hendrix is your enemy, that makes you worth helping in my book. I have money. I can pay you." "Did not ask for money." He turned back to her. "But I will ask for honesty. If you stay, you pull your weight. This is not a hotel. Can you cook, clean, mend, shoot?" "Yes to all of those." "Then we have an arrangement. You stay until you figure out what comes next. I will not bother you, and you do not bother me. Deal?" She stood and extended her hand. His hand, when he shook hers, was calloused and warm and completely engulfed her own. "Deal, Mr. Thatcher." Just Donovan. That first week passed in a blur of exhaustion and grief. Donovan gave her the bed and slept on the floor without complaint. She cooked and cleaned while he checked his trap lines and hunted. They spoke little, circling each other like wary animals. But she noticed things. The way he always gave her the best portions of meat, the way he brought her wildflowers in a tin cup one morning without explanation, the way he positioned himself between her and the door whenever his mule brayed an alarm. She noticed his scars, too, long white lines across his back when she glimpsed him washing at the creek, a puckered mark on his shoulder that looked like a bullet wound, the way his knuckles were bent and broken from old fights. Donovan Thatcher was a man who had seen violence and survived it. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, she finally asked him why he lived alone on the mountain. He was quiet for so long, she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "I was a soldier, fought in the war between the states. When I came back, I did not fit anymore in the world of towns and people. Too much noise, too many memories. So I came up here where it is quiet." "Do you ever get lonely?" "Every day." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw in his eyes. But loneliness is better than feeling like you are dying slow in the middle of a crowd. She understood that. The feeling of being utterly alone even when surrounded by people. She had felt it at her mother's funeral, with half of Provo offering empty condolences. "I am sorry about your family," Donovan said quietly. "That kind of loss does not heal. It just becomes part of you." "How do you bear it?" "One day at a time. 1 hour at a time, if that is all you can manage." He poked at the fire with a stick. "And you let yourself feel it, all of it. Trying to bury it just makes it come back worse." So she did. She let herself grieve. Some days she could barely get out of bed. Other days she threw herself into work, scrubbing the cabin until her hands were raw, mending every torn piece of clothing Donovan owned, baking bread until the cabin smelled like home. And Donovan let her be, never pushing, never demanding more than she could give. As June became July, something began to shift between them. She caught him watching her sometimes, his expression unreadable. She found herself noticing the way his muscles moved when he chopped wood, the rare smile that transformed his harsh face, the gentle way he handled injured animals he found in his traps. One afternoon, she was washing clothes in the creek when a sound made her look up. A black bear stood on the opposite bank, massive and dark, its small eyes fixed on her. Fear froze her in place. Then Donovan was there, moving between her and the bear with his rifle raised. He did not shoot. He just stood there, making himself big, and after a long moment the bear huffed and ambled away into the forest. "You are all right?" he asked, turning to her. "Yes, thank you." But when he went to walk away, she caught his arm. "Donovan, wait." He stopped, looking down at where her hand rested on his forearm. She could feel the hard muscle beneath the fabric, the warmth of his skin. "You have been so kind to me," she said. "I do not know how to repay you." "You do not owe me anything, Delilah." "Yes, I do." She stepped closer, her heart pounding. "You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. You let me grieve. You made me feel safe for the first time in weeks. Anyone with a conscience would have done the same. But it was not anyone, it was you." She looked up at him, at his dark eyes and scarred face, and the gentleness that lived beneath the rough exterior. "Why did you really let me stay, Donovan?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached up and gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. "Because the minute I saw you standing at the edge of that clearing, looking lost and scared and brave all at once, something in me woke up that had been asleep for 5 years. His voice was rough with emotion. "Because I looked at you and thought that maybe loneliness was not better after all." Her breath caught. "Donovan, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know you are still grieving. I know you might not feel the same. But you asked, and I am giving you honesty. You make this cabin feel like a home. You make me remember what it is like to want to talk to someone, to share a day with them. You make me want to be more than just a man hiding on a mountain." She reached up and laid her hand against his bearded cheek. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I have been so afraid to admit it. My family is barely in the ground, and here I am thinking about you, noticing you, wanting—" She broke off, her cheeks flushing. "Wanting what?" "Wanting you to kiss me." He cupped her face in both his large hands, tilting her head up. "Delilah Turner, you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And if you are sure, if you truly want this, I will kiss you until the sun sets and rises again." "I am sure," she breathed. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. But when she pressed closer, her hands gripping his shirt, the kiss deepened. He wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly off the ground, and she felt surrounded by his strength, his warmth, his surprising tenderness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I did not come up here looking for love," he said, "but I think it found me anyway. I think it found both of us." That night, they sat outside beneath the stars, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his parents who died of cholera when he was 16, about the horrors he saw during the war. She told him about her mother's gentle nature, about Thomas teaching her to ride, about James's terrible jokes that always made her laugh anyway. "I miss them so much it feels like I cannot breathe sometimes," she admitted. "I know." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "But they would want you to live, Delilah. They would want you to find happiness." "I think I am beginning to." As July turned to August, their relationship deepened. They moved from cautious affection to something fiercer, more necessary. Donovan still slept on the floor, protecting her reputation, even though they were alone on the mountain, but they spent their days together, working side by side. He taught her to shoot better, to read animal tracks, to move quietly through the forest. She taught him to make proper biscuits, to darn socks so they did not fall apart, to laugh again. One morning, she woke to find him gone. A note on the table said he had gone to check distant trap lines and would be back by evening. She went about her chores, but as the day wore on and he did not return, worry began to gnaw at her. Dusk fell, then full dark. Still no Donovan. She lit every lantern in the cabin and sat by the window, her rifle across her lap, watching the forest. Every sound made her jump. What if he was hurt? What if a bear had attacked him? What if Hendrix's men had somehow found him? Near midnight, she heard hoofbeats. She raised the rifle, ready to defend herself, then nearly sobbed with relief when Donovan rode into the clearing. But her relief turned to alarm when she saw he was slumped in the saddle, his shirt dark with blood. She ran out. "Donovan, what happened?" "Ran into some trouble." His voice was strained. "Help me down." He was a big man and heavy, but fear gave her strength. She got him into the cabin and onto the bed, lighting more lanterns to see the damage. A long gash across his ribs, another cut on his arm. Blood everywhere, but when she cleaned the wounds, she realized they were not as bad as they looked. Shallow cuts, painful but not life-threatening. "What happened?" she demanded as she stitched the worst of the cuts with steady hands. "Outlaws. 3 of them camped in the valley below. They saw my trap line and decided to help themselves." He winced as the needle pierced his skin. "I suggested they leave. They disagreed. We had a conversation about it. A conversation that involved knives, apparently, and fists, and a brief scuffle with a rock." He managed a faint grin. "You should see them." "Are they dead?" "No, but they will think twice before stealing from trappers again." He caught her hand. "I am all right, Delilah. I have had worse." "That does not make me feel better." She finished the last stitch and bandaged his ribs with strips of clean cloth. "You could have been killed, but I was not." "But you could have been." She sat back, her hands shaking now that the crisis was past. "And I would have been alone again, and I do not think I could bear that." He pulled her down to sit beside him on the bed. "Hey, look at me." When she did, his eyes were fierce. "I am not going anywhere. I fought through a war and 5 years of wilderness to find you. Some 2-bit outlaws are not going to take me away from you. You understand? You cannot promise that. I can promise I will fight like hell to come back to you every time." He cupped her face. "Delilah, I love you. I've been trying not to say it because I know it is too soon. I know you are still healing, but I cannot hold it back anymore. I love you, and I want you to stay here with me. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as my woman, my partner, my wife, if you will have me." Her breath caught. "Donovan, you do not have to answer now. I know I'm asking a lot. I know I'm just a scarred-up mountain man with more past than future, but I swear to you, Delilah Turner, if you say yes, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret it. I will protect you, provide for you, love you until my last breath." Tears streamed down her face. You're not giving me much choice, are you? How can I say no to that? Is that a yes? That is a yes, you stubborn man. She leaned forward and kissed him carefully, mindful of his injuries. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will stay. Yes to all of it. He pulled her close, ignoring his wounds, and kissed her properly. When they broke apart, he was grinning like a fool. We will have to go to the nearest town to find a preacher, he said. That is Fort Bridger, about 3 days' ride from here. We can go in a week when I'm healed up. Do not push yourself. Delilah, I just got myself a fiancé. I will heal twice as fast out of pure joy. She laughed and carefully nestled against his uninjured side. They lay together on the narrow bed, talking quietly about the future. He wanted to build an addition to the cabin, give them more room. Maybe add a barn so they could keep more animals. She wanted a garden, flowers as well as vegetables. Children, eventually, though neither of them rushed to that topic. We will need to be careful, Donovan said seriously. Hendricks and his men might still be looking for you. I have been thinking about that. It has been nearly 2 months. Maybe he has forgotten about me. Men like Hendricks do not forget witnesses to murder. Donovan's arm tightened around her. We will keep a low profile in Fort Bridger, use different names if we have to. But I will not have you living in fear, Delilah. If it comes to it, I will deal with Hendricks myself. No, I do not want you risking your life for revenge. Not revenge, protection. He kissed her forehead. But we will worry about that if it comes. For now, let us focus on happier things, like the fact that I am going to marry the most incredible woman in the Utah Territory. A week later, Donovan was healed enough to travel. They packed supplies, saddled the horses, and began the journey to Fort Bridger. The August days were hot, but the mountain air kept the worst of the heat at bay. They traveled slowly, enjoying each other's company, stopping to rest in shaded groves and cool creeks. On the second night, they camped in a meadow full of wildflowers. Delilah picked a bouquet while Donovan set up their small tent. When she came back, he had started a fire and was setting out their supper. This is my wedding bouquet, she announced, holding up the flowers. He smiled. Then I better make sure I have a ring for you. You have a ring? Not yet. But Fort Bridger has a jeweler. I have money saved. He looked suddenly uncertain. Unless you would rather have something else? I do not know much about what women like. She set down the flowers and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Donovan Thatcher, I would marry you with a piece of string tied around my finger. Whatever you choose will be perfect because it comes from you. He held her close, and they stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Later, as they lay in their separate bedrolls with the fire between them, he reached across and took her hand. One more day, he said. Then you will be Delilah Thatcher. I can hardly wait. Fort Bridger was smaller than Provo, but bustling with trappers, traders, and travelers heading west. They arrived on a hot afternoon, their horses dusty and tired. Donovan led them to a boarding house run by a friendly widow named Mrs. Patterson, who raised no eyebrows when they asked for separate rooms. Looking to get married, are you? She asked, noticing the way they stood close together. Yes, madam, Donovan said. Know where we might find a preacher? Reverend Holmes, little church at the end of Main Street. He will marry you quick enough if you have the fee. She winked at Delilah. Congratulations, dear. You have got yourself a fine-looking man there. Delilah blushed. Thank you. They cleaned up and went to find the jeweler. The shop was tiny but well-stocked. Donovan insisted she choose the ring herself. She picked a simple gold band with a small sapphire set in it, the stone as blue as the mountain sky. It is beautiful, she breathed as Donovan paid the jeweler. Like you, he said simply. They found Reverend Holmes at his church, a kind-faced man in his 50s who agreed to marry them the next morning. That night, Delilah barely slept. Excitement and nerves kept her awake, along with the surreal nature of it all. 2 months ago, her family had been alive. Now she was hours away from marrying a man she had known for only 6 weeks. But when she thought about Donovan, about his strength and gentleness and the way he looked at her like she was precious, all her doubts faded. This was right. This was meant to be. The next morning, she wore her best dress, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Mrs. Patterson lent her a veil and helped pin up her hair. When Delilah looked in the mirror, she saw her mother's eyes looking back at her and felt a pang of grief that her family could not be here for this day. But then she thought about what Donovan had said. They would want her to live, to find happiness. This was living. This was happiness. The church was empty except for Reverend Holmes and Mrs. Patterson, who insisted on coming as a witness. Donovan waited at the altar, dressed in new clothes purchased that morning, dark trousers and a white shirt, his hair pulled back and his beard neatly trimmed. When he saw Delilah, his face transformed with joy. She walked down the short aisle, her wild flower bouquet clutched in her hands. When she reached him, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You look like an angel," he whispered. "And you look like a man who's about to marry me," she whispered back. The ceremony was short and simple. They repeated their vows, their voices steady and sure. When Reverend Holmes pronounced them husband and wife, Donovan kissed her softly, tenderly, a promise sealed. Mrs. Patterson threw dried rose petals over them as they left the church. "You go on and be happy now," she said, hugging Delilah. "Lord knows this world needs more happiness." They stayed one more night at the boarding house, and for the first time, they shared a room. Donovan was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished. They came together with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, and afterward, lying in his arms, she felt complete in a way she had not since the day her family died. "I love you, Mrs. Thatcher," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Thatcher." The ride back to the mountain took 4 days because they were in no hurry. They stopped at every beautiful spot, made love in meadows and beneath pine trees, talked about everything under the sun. By the time they reached the cabin, Delilah felt like a different person from the broken girl who had stumbled into the clearing 2 months ago. The rest of August and all of September passed in blissful domesticity. Donovan built the addition to the cabin, 2 new rooms that gave them space for a proper bedroom and a workroom for Delilah's sewing and his leather work. She planted a late garden and was thrilled when the seeds sprouted. They hunted and fished and gathered berries, preparing for the winter ahead. October brought the first frost, and with it, a visitor. Delilah was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats. Donovan was checking traps a mile away. Fear spiked through her as she saw a man ride into the clearing, but the man raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Donovan Thatcher here?" he called. He was young, maybe 20, with a friendly face. "He is out on his trap line. Can I help you?" "You must be his wife. Heard he got married. I am Samuel Young, got a cabin about 10 miles west." He dismounted. "I came to warn you. Some men were nosing around my place yesterday asking about a woman. They described you pretty close, madam. Said she was wanted for questioning about some trouble down Provo way." Delilah's blood ran cold. "What did you tell them?" "That I had not seen anyone. But if they are asking me, they are asking everyone in these mountains. Figured you should know." "Thank you." Her mind raced. Did they say how many of them there were? 4 riders, led by a big man in a white hat. Hendricks. After all this time, he was still hunting her. Donovan returned an hour later to find Delilah packing supplies with shaking hands. Samuel Young had stayed, and he quickly explained the situation. Donovan's face went hard. "They found her." "Looks that way. I'm sorry, Thatcher." "Not your fault." Donovan turned to Delilah. "We need to leave, tonight. Go deeper into the mountains where they cannot track us." "Or we stand and fight," Delilah said quietly. "No." "Donovan, I am tired of running. I am tired of looking over my shoulder. If Hendricks wants me dead, let him come. We will be ready." "Delilah, there are 4 of them, and 2 of us." "3, Samuel Young said. "I will help. Hendricks and his kind have been pushing mountain folk around for too long. Time someone pushed back." Donovan looked between them, then sighed. "You're both crazy, but if we are doing this, we do it smart. We set a trap of our own." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Donovan knew these woods better than anyone. He set up positions in the trees surrounding the cabin, places where they could shoot from cover. He strung tripwires that would alert them to anyone approaching. He loaded every gun they owned and made sure Delilah and Samuel knew the plan. "If things go bad, you run," he told Delilah. "You get on a horse and you ride and you do not look back." "I am not leaving you." "Delilah." "No," she grabbed his shirt. "We are in this together, for better or worse, remember. We just promised that." He pulled her close and held her tight. I cannot lose you. Then we will not lose each other. The men came at dawn, when the light was thin and gray. Donovan was in position in a tree to the north. Samuel was hidden behind the woodpile. Delilah crouched inside the cabin, watching through a window, her rifle ready. She recognized Hendricks immediately, even after months. The white hat, the arrogant posture. 3 men rode with him, all armed with rifles. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, studying the cabin. "Thatcher," Hendricks called. "We know the Turner girl's in there. Send her out and we will leave you be. This is not your fight." Donovan's voice came from the trees, echoing so they could not pinpoint his location. "You are on my land. That makes it my fight." Hendricks scanned the forest, trying to locate him. "Be reasonable, Thatcher. The girl witnessed a crime. She needs to come back to Provo to give her statement." "Funny way of taking a statement, riding up here with armed men." "For her protection." "You murdered my family," Delilah shouted from the cabin. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Hendricks's face twisted. "You have been filling her head with lies, Thatcher. Only lie here is whatever you are selling." Donovan's voice was calm, deadly. "You have got 10 seconds to turn around and ride out. After that, I start shooting. There are 4 of us and 1 of you. Are you sure about that?" Samuel Young stepped out from behind the woodpile, his rifle trained on Hendricks. "Make that 2. And I know you are good with numbers, Hendricks. 2 against 4 are not bad odds when 2 have the high ground and know these woods." Hendricks's eyes narrowed. "You are making a big mistake." 10 seconds, Donovan repeated. 9, 8. One of Hendricks's men lost his nerve and wheeled his horse around, galloping back the way they came. That left 3. 7, 6. "You are a dead man, Thatcher," Hendricks snarled. 5, 4. Hendricks went for his gun. Donovan shot first, the crack of the rifle sharp in the morning air. The bullet took Hendricks's hat right off his head. A warning shot. The other 2 men returned fire, shooting wildly at the trees. Samuel shot one of them in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. Delilah aimed carefully and shot the other man's horse, sending it rearing and throwing its rider. Hendricks found himself suddenly alone, his men down or fled. He stared at the cabin, at the trees, at Samuel, his face purple with rage. "This is not over," he shouted. "Yeah, it is." Donovan dropped from the tree, landing with cat-like grace despite his size. He walked toward Hendricks, his rifle pointed at the man's chest. "You are going to turn around and ride out of here. You're going to leave Delilah alone. You're going to tell everyone in Provo that the Turner matter is closed. And if I ever hear that you came within 100 miles of her again, I will come down from this mountain and I will end you. Are we clear?" Hendricks's horse danced nervously. For a long moment, the cattle baron stared at Donovan, weighing his options. Then he saw something in Donovan's eyes that made his decision for him. He jerked his horse's head around and spurred away, leaving his wounded men behind. Samuel went to check on the 2 downed riders. One was unconscious, his shoulder bleeding. The other was climbing to his feet, looking dazed. "Can you ride?" Samuel asked them. "I think so," the dazed one said. "Then get your friend and get out of here. Tell Hendricks that if he comes back, we will not be so generous next time." They did, helping the wounded man onto a horse and riding out slowly. Delilah burst from the cabin and ran to Donovan, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "It is over," he said. "It is really over." "Are you sure?" "Hendricks is a coward at heart. He will not risk coming back." Donovan pulled back to look at her. "You are safe now. We are safe." Samuel Young grinned at them. "That was some fine shooting, Mrs. Thatcher." "Thank you for helping us, Samuel." "Any time. Now I best be getting back to my own place." He tipped his hat. "You 2 take care of each other." After he left, Delilah and Donovan stood in the clearing, holding each other as the sun rose higher and burned away the last of the fear. It truly was over. The shadow that had hung over her since that terrible June day was finally gone. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now we live," Donovan said simply. "We build our life together. We let the past go and focus on the future." And that was exactly what they did. The winter came, cold and harsh, but the cabin was warm and their supplies were plentiful. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading, talking, making love. Delilah taught Donovan to play chess using a set she carved from wood. He taught her to play the harmonica, though she was terrible at it, and they both ended up laughing. Spring arrived with snowmelt and wildflowers, and Delilah realized she was pregnant. When she told Donovan, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then carefully set her down and looked panicked. "Did I hurt the baby? I should not have done that. Are you all right?" She laughed. "I'm fine. The baby is fine. You're going to be a wonderful father, you overgrown warrior." He was wonderful, doting on her through the pregnancy, building a cradle, baby-proofing the cabin, fretting over every little thing. In late October, their son was born, a healthy baby with Donovan's dark hair and Delilah's blue eyes. They named him Samuel Thomas Thatcher, for her father and oldest brother. "Your family lives on," Donovan told her as she held their son. "In him, in us, in the life we are building." 2 years later, a daughter arrived. They named her Grace because that was what Delilah felt every day. Grace that she had survived, grace that she had found Donovan, grace that their love had created this beautiful life. The children grew. Samuel was adventurous and brave like his father. Grace was thoughtful and clever like her mother. They filled the cabin with laughter and chaos and joy. Samuel Young became a regular visitor, an honorary uncle to the children. Other mountain families drifted into their orbit, creating a small community of people who looked out for each other. One summer day, when Samuel was 8 and Grace was 6, a stranger rode into the clearing. Delilah's heart jumped with old fear, but the man was elderly, with a badge on his chest. "Donovan Thatcher?" he called. Donovan came out of the barn, putting himself between the stranger and his family. "That is me. I am Marshall Garrett from Salt Lake City. I'm looking for a woman named Delilah Turner. Heard she might be up this way." "Why?" Donovan's voice was hard. "Because Marcus Hendricks is dead, killed in a gunfight 3 months ago. Before he died, he confessed to a lot of crimes, including the murder of Samuel Turner and his sons. There is no warrant for Miss Turner. She is free and clear. Just thought she should know." Delilah stepped forward. "I am Delilah Thatcher. I was Delilah Turner." The marshal tipped his hat. "Madam, I am sorry for your loss and for the trouble Hendricks caused you. Justice took a long time coming, but it came. Thank you for telling me." After the marshal left, Delilah stood very still. Donovan came to her, putting his arms around her from behind. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "I feel like a chapter just closed, like I can finally let go of the last bit of anger and fear I was holding." She turned in his arms. "I feel free." That night, after the children were asleep, they walked down to the creek and sat on the bank, watching the stars reflect in the water. "Do you ever regret it?" Donovan asked. "Staying here with me instead of going back to civilization?" "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong, with you, with our children. This life we built together is everything I could have wanted." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you regret taking in a lost girl all those years ago?" "Taking you in was the best decision I ever made. You saved me, Delilah. I was just existing before you. You taught me how to really live." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, listening to the night sounds of the forest. In the distance, an owl hooted. The creek burbled over stones. The wind whispered through the pines. "I love you," Delilah said softly. "I love you too, always." Years continued to pass, bringing changes and growth. Samuel grew tall and strong like his father, taking over more of the trapping and hunting. Grace discovered a talent for drawing and filled the cabin with sketches of the mountains and animals and her family. Another son, named James, for Delilah's youngest brother, arrived when Grace was 10. He was quieter than his siblings, thoughtful and gentle. Delilah taught all 3 children to read and write, using the books from Donovan's shelves and any new ones they could acquire on their rare trips to Fort Bridger. Donovan taught them to survive in the wilderness, to respect nature, to shoot straight and think clearly. Together, they raised children who were strong, kind, and capable. When Samuel was 18, he surprised them by announcing he wanted to go to Salt Lake City to learn a trade. "I love the mountains," he said, "but I want to see more of the world, learn things we cannot learn up here. Then maybe I will come back and put those skills to use." It was hard to let him go, but they did, trusting they had raised him well. He returned 2 years later as an apprentice blacksmith, full of stories and ideas. He set up a forge in the valley below their cabin and began serving the scattered mountain community. Within another year, he married a girl from Fort Bridger and brought her to the mountains, and the cycle continued. Grace, at 19, fell in love with a young trapper named Daniel, who wandered into their clearing looking for directions and stayed for dinner. 6 months later, they married, and she moved to his cabin 15 miles north, though she visited often with her growing family. James, true to his nature, stayed close to home, helping his aging father with the trap lines and the endless work of mountain living. He was content with the quiet life, the changing seasons, the rhythm of the wilderness. Delilah and Donovan grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing but their love deepening with every year. On their 30th anniversary, they returned to the meadow where Donovan had proposed during their journey to Fort Bridger. 30 years, Delilah marveled. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Donovan, his beard now more white than brown, pulled her close. Best 30 years of my life. Even when Grace broke her arm falling out of that tree? Even then. Even when Samuel accidentally set the barn on fire? Even then. Even when James brought home that orphaned bear cub that destroyed half the cabin? Donovan laughed. Even then, every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it, because I shared it with you. She kissed him, this man who had saved her life and then built a life with her. This man who had shown her that love could bloom even in the darkest soil, that happiness could be found in the most unexpected places. They lived many more years in that cabin on the mountain. They welcomed grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They watched their family tree grow and spread, knowing that Samuel Turner's bloodline would continue, that her brothers and father were not forgotten. On a warm spring morning, when Delilah was 73 and Donovan was 78, they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Donovan's health had been failing, his heart growing weak, but he insisted on being outside to see the dawn. "Do you remember the day we met?" Delilah asked, holding his weathered hand. "Every detail. You standing at the edge of the clearing, looking like you had been through hell but refusing to break. I knew right then you were special. I was terrified. You were brave. I was lucky. Lucky you were the one I found." Donovan turned to look at her, his dark eyes still sharp despite his age. "We made a good life, did not we? We made a beautiful life." Tears pricked her eyes because she knew this conversation, knew what was coming. The best life. "No regrets?" "Not a single one." He smiled and squeezed her hand. "Good. That is good." He looked back at the sunrise. "I am tired, Delilah." "I know. But I am not afraid, because I know I loved you well, and I was loved in return, and that is all a man can ask for." "You loved me perfectly," she whispered. They sat together as the sun rose higher, warming their faces. And sometime during that beautiful spring morning, with his hand in hers and the mountains standing eternal around them, Donovan Thatcher took his last breath. Delilah sat with him for a long time, memorizing his face, thanking him for every moment, every year, every breath they had shared. Then she called for James, and together with her son, she prepared her husband for burial. They laid him to rest in the meadow beside the cabin, under a tall pine tree with a view of the valley. The whole family came, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them touched by the love story that had started with a desperate woman and a lonely mountain man. Delilah lived 3 more years, surrounded by family, telling stories of Donovan and the life they built. She spoke often of her father and brothers too, keeping their memories alive. When her own end came, quietly in her sleep, they buried her beside Donovan under that tall pine. Samuel the younger, now a gray-haired grandfather himself, carved 2 headstones from mountain granite. On Donovan's, he inscribed, "He saved her, she healed him. Together, they built a dynasty of love." On Delilah's, "She came running from death and found life everlasting." The cabin stood for generations, maintained by the family, a testament to what 2 people could build with determination, courage, and love. The story of Donovan and Delilah became legend in the Utah mountains, passed down through the years, growing richer with each telling. And if you were to visit that meadow today, you would find the pine tree still standing guard over 2 graves, the headstones weathered but readable. You might hear the wind whisper through the branches and imagine it is carrying echoes of laughter, of loving words spoken long ago, of a love that conquered bloodshed and fear and grief. Because in the end, that is what endures. Not the violence, not the pain, not the fear, but the love that blooms in spite of it all. The love that saves us, the love that heals, the love that carries us forward into tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Delilah Turner came to that mountain broken and alone, running from death. Donovan Thatcher was hiding on that mountain, trying to forget how to live. And together they found what neither knew they were searching for: a home, a family, a love that would outlast them both and echo through generations. The range war took her brothers and her father, leaving her with nothing but grief and fear. But the mountain man took her far from the bloodshed, and in doing so, gave her everything: safety, love, purpose, and a legacy that would endure long after the last shot of that long-ago war had faded into silence. In the quiet places of the Utah mountains, where the pine trees grow tall and the creeks run cold and clear, their story lives on. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope survives. That love can find us when we least expect it. That home is not a place, but a person who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to stay. And that sometimes running from death is exactly how we find life.